Alright everybody, welcome to the 6th annual Favorite Albums of the Year. Today we are going to be talking about my favorite albums of 2024. I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little bit off throughout this video. I have been sick for the past week. This is my only day off and I just wanted to crank this video out for you guys. This has been a very interesting year for music, and personally, I think other years have been better, but we do still have some bangers that came out this year. Last year we had 13 top albums along with 7 honorable mentions and no deluxe albums. This year we've got 12 albums, 4 honorable mentions, and 4 deluxe albums that we need to talk about. But before we get into things, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a ticketing platform where you can buy any type of concert tickets or any type of sporting tickets to wherever you would like. If you use my code Childish Brandino, you can get $20 off your first purchase. Make sure to use the link in the description to get $20 off your first purchase and use code Childish Brandino. Alright, so most of you guys know, if you have seen my previous favorite albums of the year, that I usually start the video off with my Spotify Wrapped. This was definitely an interesting year for my top artists and for my top songs. I completely agree with most of my top artists. So for my top artists, we got number 1 at 21 Pilots, very understandable. Number 2, Childish Gambino, of course, why wouldn't he be on there? 3, Deftones, I'm not too sure why they're number 3, I'm pretty sure I listened to them a lot, but I didn't think I listened to them that much. And then number 4 and number 5, I completely love these two bands, but I don't think I listened to them that much for them to be on number 4 and number 5, but still great bands to begin with. So then when we're looking at my top songs, we've got Plush by Stone Temple Pilots. I was completely obsessed with this song the entire year. I actually saw them back in August and at Rockville. Number 2, we've got Overcompensate by 21 Pilots. This one's very interesting because I feel like I listened to other songs more than I did to Overcompensate on this record, but it may be because this was the first single and maybe somehow I played it so many times for it to be at number 2. Number 3, we've got Hole in the Earth by Deftones. I discovered the song for the first time this year. It was phenomenal when I first heard it, and I just had it on repeat and repeat and repeat. Check it out. Number 4, we've got Stop Playing Girl by Sundiver California. I also saw these guys back in April, I believe, and I actually got to meet them, and they signed my vinyl. It was a very fun experience. Amazing guys. Please check this album out. And then finally, we've got Hot Dog by Limp Bizkit. Very, very weird seeing that on here, but I was a little obsessed with this song this year. I saw them back in August too. That was also a phenomenal show. Let me know in the comments what were your top 5 songs and top 5 artists. I'm really interested to see what my viewers are listening to. But enough of Spotify Wrapped. Let's get into what you guys are actually clicked on the video for. Coming in at number 12, we've got Found Heaven by Conan Gray. I did not think I would get into this album. My girlfriend tried playing it for me a bunch of times. I really wasn't getting into it, but after probably about 15 listens, it became very catchy, and it's kind of like some 80s synth music. It's very great. I definitely recommend checking it out. Just go in having an open mind, and I think you would probably enjoy it. I'm not going to say too much about this album, but as you guys know, for each album, I like to give you guys my top 3 and then my least favorite on the album. And before we actually get into that top 3 and least favorite, I just want you guys to know that just because it's my least favorite doesn't mean that it's a horrible song. It's just the one I probably listen to the least on the album. And in case that turns out to be your favorite song, I just want you to know that I respect everybody's music opinions. These albums are my personal opinion, and you may have your own personal opinion about the way you feel about music, because music is subjective, but let's get back into it. So my top 3 on this album probably has to be Never Ending Song, Bourgeoisie's, and Eye of the Night. I was obsessed of Never Ending Song. You could ask my girlfriend. That was kind of my tick for some days. I kept just saying, like a never ending song. I kept saying that so much out of nowhere. It was probably driving her crazy. But yeah, definitely check those songs out. My least favorite probably has to be Forever With Me. That was probably the one I probably skipped the most, but it's not bad, but check this out. Coming in at number 11, we've got Vultures 1 by Kanye West and Ty Dolla $ign. What a very, very interesting, long-awaited album, I guess you could say. And it was a very, very confusing rollout. And you know Kanye, he always says it's going to drop on this day, and then it's going to be this day, and this day, and this day. It just keeps changing and changing and changing. Once the album came out, I actually really enjoyed it. There were a lot of songs that stuck with me for a while. And by a while, I probably mean like a month, and then the album completely fell off for me and I forgot about it. I feel like that's kind of mean to say, but there definitely was a time where I listened to this religiously. So if you guys remember my last top albums of the year, I told you I may be seeing Travis Scott next year, and I did end up seeing Travis Scott in Orlando with Jace. And he brought out Kanye West and Ty Dolla $ign and a few other people. So I got to hear a lot of Kanye songs, including the song Vultures, which was before this album came out. So that was a very cool experience. So technically I could say I got to see them. It was a very, very good experience. But this album just completely fell off for me. And there were a couple times where I went back to it and I was like, okay, I remember loving this. Why did I stop listening to it? And then the next day I would completely forget about it again. So my top 3 for this album is probably going to be Fuck Some, Paperwork, and King. My least one's probably going to be Hood Rat. I know that was kind of a commonly hated song. I couldn't really get into it. Just the constant saying Hood Rat in the background was just kind of off-putting for me. So coming in at number 10, we've got Brat by Charlie XCX. When this album came out, I listened to it a crap ton, but I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was because of the over popularity of this album or something, but it just, I don't know, people were hyping it up to be like the most perfect album ever. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of songs on here that are really fun to listen to, but I don't know, this was higher up on the list. Like, I think I had this in like the top 5, but just over time after it came out, it just was slowly falling off for me. I did go see Charlie a few months ago for the Sweat Tour. That concert was okay. It was just, I think, the switch between Troy and Charlie every few songs that was kind of throwing it off for me. And I don't know, she just doesn't also sing a lot of her songs. It's mainly just the backtrack in the background with her kind of dancing around. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for my opinion of this album, but hey, I did really enjoy it at one point, but it just, like I said, it just kind of just kept going downhill. So my top 3 for this album is probably going to be Everything Is Romantic, Von Dutch, and Mean Girls. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but my least favorite is probably Apple. I never saw the appeal to that song, and it just got super popular, and I don't know, I know there's a dance behind it, but I personally didn't really care for that song, and I'm just going to move on to the next one. So coming in at number 9, we've got Hyperdrama by Justice. I personally believe they are the new Daft Punk. Since we no longer have our Daft Punk, this is the closest we're ever going to get. Once this album came out, it was amazing. Every single that they released was absolutely amazing. You guys definitely need to check this album out if you love like that kind of funk disco Daft Punk sounding electronic music. It's so good. And if you like Tame Impala, they are on this album and they do fantastic. So it's a little hard to choose a top 3, so I think I'm going to give you a top 4. My top 4 are going to be Never Ender, One Night All Night, Incognito, and Saturnine. I'm going to take the easy way out. My least favorite is probably going to be Harpy Dream, which is just like a 28-second long song, because every other song is just such a banger on here. So coming in at number 8, we've got I Can't Thank You Enough by Willis. I saw Willis last December. I had the flu while seeing it, so I kind of distanced myself from people. So normally I would be at the barricade at the front, but I kind of sat in the back so I could be away from people, and there was also some chairs in the back, so I was able to just relax and enjoy the concert, because it was actually their first time in Florida, and I've been waiting years for them to come to Florida. So they actually performed a few of the songs from this album before it even came out, which was a very good experience. And then the album came out this year, and oh my gosh, you guys really need to check this album out. So my top 3 are going to be Lay Low, Magenta, and More Than Happy. Absolute bangers. It's very hard to choose a least favorite, but probably the one that I listen to the most is Perdido. Coming in at number 7, we've got Empathogen by Willow. Oh my gosh, Willow is such a talented person. If you watched my video from last year, I talked about an album she came out before. It was kind of like a rock album. Absolutely amazing, and with each album she comes out with, she explores a new genre of music. So this is kind of like jazz, scat music. It's amazing. Like, you guys really need to check this out. So we did see Willow this year. She opened up for Childish Gambino. She had a single called Alone that I really loved, which sadly was not on this album. I think it would have been great, but she didn't put it on this album. But my top 3 are probably going to be Symptom of Life, Run, and Big Feelings. My least favorite is probably going to be the opening track, Home, which is featuring Jon Batiste. It's still a very good song. I don't listen to it as much as I did when it first came out. So coming in at number 6, this saddens me to say, but we've got Notebook Fantasy by Chicano Batman. Why does it sadden me to say? Because this band is no longer a band. Their final album, and towards the middle of this year, they announced that they are done touring and that they are not going to be a band anymore. And I was really hoping they would come back here for their final tour, but the nearest they came to was around Atlanta, and I didn't travel up there. But oh my gosh, this band is crazy. They are so good. They have an amazing sound, and just look at that album cover. It's like a spiral. Like this is exactly what it throws you into when you listen to this album. Just a complete spiral. I was completely obsessed with one of the songs this year called Beautiful Daughter. So that's going to be in my top 3. So we've got Beautiful Daughter, Losing My Mind, and the title track Notebook Fantasy. My least favorite is probably going to be Hojas Secas, mainly because it's in Spanish. It's not that I don't like Spanish music, it's just it was the one that I kind of didn't really go to since I didn't take the time to understand what the song was about. Before we get into our top 5, I want to talk about our deluxe section of the year. So this section is going to be albums that came out in maybe the year before, but this year they came out with their deluxe version or a more updated version of the album. These are in no order compared to my top albums of the year, so I'm just going to go in just some random order. So the first deluxe album we've got is Guts Spilled by Olivia Rodrigo. So for these deluxe songs, I'm just going to give you my most favorite and my least favorite. So my most favorite is definitely going to be Obsessed. My least favorite is probably going to be Girl I Always Been. We've got the second deluxe album. We've got Days Before Rodeo. Technically, this is not a deluxe album. This came out 10 years ago. It was released on streaming for the first time this year, and I have always loved this album, and I'm so glad he decided to put it on streaming. So my top song is probably going to be Don't Play, and my least favorite is probably going to be Zombies. I feel like I'm really rushing through these, but the third one we've got is Childish Gambino's Out of Vista. So if you guys didn't know about this album, this originally was called 3/15/20, which released in 2020. I absolutely love this album. It was in my top albums of 2020. And to be honest, I sort of prefer the original version. With this new version, he updated the vocals and just the production on it because he says that it was an unfinished album, so it was kind of like a rough draft. And he did add some songs and remove some songs that were on the first one. And certain versions from the first album are a little bit different on this album. For example, Psilocybe was 1238 and To Be Hunted was 1910. On the original album, there was an awesome transition from both of those songs into each other. And it still has that transition from Psilocybe, but once you go to Be Hunted, it just completely changes the sound. So there's kind of no point in having that fake transition. Another thing that really throws it off for me, but we finally got Human Sacrifice on the album. Us fans have been waiting for years for that song to come out, and we finally got it. Another song that was added on here was Out of Vista. It's a good song, but it definitely isn't the best, but I still love it and listen to it all the time. So my most favorite on here is probably going to be To Be Hunted. And then my least favorite is probably going to be Littlefoot Bigfoot. The only time I ever really listened to it on 3/15/20 was kind of the end part. I really liked the beat, but then this new version I wasn't really a big fan of it, especially when it was featured Young Nudie. So we've got our last deluxe album, which is going to be Angel Face Club Deluxe by Steven Sanchez. I saw Steven Sanchez last December at the Barricade, and that has become one of my most popular videos on my channel. And then I recently saw him for my birthday, and that was also amazing. And I'm so glad he actually performed the songs from the deluxe album at that show. So because the deluxe album songs on here are so amazing, I'm going to give you a top 2 and then my one least favorite. So my top 2 are going to be Emotional Vacation and The Other Side. The vocal performance that he has in just all of his songs is so impressive. But my least favorite is probably going to be Fame or Fortune. I love that song so much, but a lot of times it's a very slow song. So moving back to our ranked list, we've got number 5, which is going to be Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet. Yeah, I was very surprised that this album was on this list because I didn't really care for Espresso when it came out, and I didn't care for Please Please Please. I thought those songs were very, very annoying. But eventually I did get around to the album because I was like, well, I'm an Olivia Rodrigo fan, so maybe I'll like the Sabrina songs. So let's see. So I started listening to it. There were some songs that I started to like, and then eventually I became very obsessed with it. I saw her back in October. That was an amazing concert and actually made me become even more of a fan because of the performance that she gave. The only thing about this album is that sometimes it kind of sounds like a middle schooler finding out in sex ed class what sex is and writing lyrics about it. It just sounds very childish at some points, and sometimes when I hear those lyrics I just think they're kind of so corny sometimes. But overall, it's a very good album. I was almost about to put this above the next album, but I think you guys would have hated me, and I took some more time to think about my choice. But you guys will definitely understand once we get to the next album. But we're still on this album, so we're going to give you our top 3 and then my least favorite. Top 3 is probably going to be Bed Chem, Taste, and Don't Smile. Don't Smile was actually number 6 in my top songs on Spotify because I don't know what was going on, but I was just listening to it on repeat, and I think it's a very good soundtrack, and it low-key makes me float in the air. My least favorite is probably going to be Slim Pickens. I don't know. That's actually the only song on this album that I don't have downloaded because I can't get around to it. I don't understand the appeal to this song, so sorry. So coming in at number 4, kind of obvious, we've got Tyler, the Creator's Chromacopia. Overall, this is a really good album. I love the mix on this album and just the sound of it. It's definitely not in my top 3 Tyler albums, but when I first listened to the album, I was kind of not really into it, so it took me a few listens, but that's what also happened to me about Call Me If You Get Lost. Part of the reason I think this is not in my top 3 is mainly because of the songs where Tyler kind of just like talks the whole time over a beat, which I've never really been a fan of his songs when he does that. But my top 3 are probably going to be Saint Chroma, Ratata, and Thought I Was Dead. But I don't know, there are a few songs on here that I don't find myself listening to, which are like Hey Jane, Judge Judy, and Balloon. I know Balloon's a little controversial because people really love that song, but I don't know what it is. Overall, it's a really good album, and I find myself listening to it more than the other ones on the list. So as you know, every year before we get into our top 3, we're going to talk about our honorable mentions. We've got 4 this year. So our first honorable mention, not in any order, is Coldplay's Moon Music. When Music of the Spheres came out, I was absolutely obsessed with that album. And then this is kind of like a sequel to that album called Moon Music. There were only a couple songs on here that I liked, but overall there really weren't anything that I was absolutely obsessed with. So with this, I'm going to give you guys a top song and a least favorite song. So my top song is probably going to be Eterna. I think that is a very weird song for them, but I love the instrumental and I love the way it kind of pulls off. So my least favorite is probably going to be We Pray. This was a single they came out with, but I never really got into it. There's a lot of people on this song, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel like Coldplay to me. Alright, our third honorable mention. Wow, Vultures 2. What an absolute downgrade from Vultures 1. What a mess of an album rollout this was too when it came out. So many songs sounded absolute garbage. They had to take them off and re-upload them. To be honest, there's only one song on here that I come back to, and that one's probably Field Trip, because that's actually a pretty good song, and looking on Spotify right now, that's the biggest song on the album, probably because it's the only good one on the album. So I'm not even going to give my least favorite because there are just plenty on here, but I just wanted to mention it since Vultures 1 was in the top 12, but Vultures 2 isn't. Alright, at our last honorable mention, we've got Schoolboy Q's Blue Lips. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this. People absolutely love this album. I just, for some reason, couldn't really get into it. There was not really a song in here that I really enjoyed. So my favorite song in here is probably going to be Pop with Rico Nasty. I love how hard that it goes, but like I said, I probably listened to it for like a week and it just kind of fell off for me. So we're going to get into our top 3 right now. So coming in at number 3, we've got Billie Eilish's Hit Me Hard and Soft. Alright guys, this album is absolutely phenomenal. It's very, very hard for me to choose a top 3. So for my top 3 albums, I'm probably going to give you guys a top 5 on the album because it's absolutely too hard. It's too hard. I went with this at number 3 because I listened to this a lot, but then there was a time where I stopped listening to it, and the number 2 album kind of stayed more in my rotation compared to this. But I have gone back to this recently, and I have been on the run of it recently. I think the emotion that Billie puts into this album is great, and she really shows her passion for music in it, and I respect her so much for that. It's definitely different compared to her previous albums, but I think it's a good different because previous albums I weren't a big fan. There were only a few songs in there that I loved, but this is a great direction that she's in, and I love the experimentation that she did on this. So my top 5 on here are probably going to be Chihiro, The Greatest, L'amour de ma vie, Bittersweet, and Skinny. My least favorite, I usually skip Lunch. It's not a bad song, but it's definitely not my favorite. I would rather listen to the others. Alright, coming in at number 2, we've got Bando Stone in the New World by Childish Gambino. What an absolutely fantastic album. I saw Gambino back in September, and a lot of people didn't really like this album, which I can understand because he did say that this was his last Childish Gambino album, which I may agree with some people saying that this really wasn't the strongest last album he could have done, but I still think that it's really good. I actually dressed up as Bando Stone for the concert, and it was really, really cool. I was featured on the Bando Stone Instagram account. I also bought the Bando Stone action figure, which was very limited, and I would like to say I'm very, very lucky I got to see him because he did cancel the rest of the tour due to health issues. We still don't know what's going on with him, and I really hope he's okay, but he canceled it 2 shows after my show, and I'm very, very lucky I got to see him. So my top 5 on this album is probably going to have to be Hearts Were Meant to Fly, Lithonia, Cruisin', One and Around, and In the Night. Definitely check this album out if you haven't before, and this is also the soundtrack to his upcoming movie, which we're not sure if that's still happening. My least favorite probably has to be Can You Feel Me? It's definitely not a song I want to listen to every day, but I can tell it's probably definitely made for the movie since it features his son, which his son is in the movie. But overall, a great album, and I'm so glad my favorite artist was able to drop an album this year. Alright everybody, I'm gonna still have to do a drum roll, but you probably already guessed what my top album is, but drum roll please. Coming in at number 1, we've got Clancy by 21 Pilots. What a surprise! Every time they drop an album, except for Scaled and Icy, it's usually my number 1. They are usually my number 1 artist of the year once they drop an album, and they really blew it out the park with this album. I'm so glad I got to see them on their tour this year, and we had really good seats, and they got to play Slow Town, which is from my favorite album of them of all time, and they rarely play from that album. And how amazing was it that we were one of 2 shows that got that song live. But enough about that album, we're talking about Clancy here. The amount of passion and stuff that went into this album is incredible, and you guys definitely need to check it out. When I first listened to it, as it usually goes, you know, usually the best albums you don't like in the beginning. So when I listened to this album for the first time, I wasn't a big fan of it. There were probably maybe like 2 or 3 songs that I actively enjoyed on it. But over time, I became super obsessed with it and was just preparing so much for the concert. I don't even know what to say about this album. I'm speechless because of just how great it is. So my top 5 on this album is probably going to have to be Next Semester, Midwest Indigo, Vignette, Navigating, and Paladin Straight. Paladin Straight, when I first heard it for the first time, it saddened me because I didn't like it, and I was like, this is really what they're ending the album with. But over time, it started giving me chills. I listen to it all the time now, and it's definitely a great ending track. I don't know, it's the best ending track on all of their albums. They genuinely put so much creativity in their music. My least favorite on here is probably gotta be the Craving Jenna's version. The single version I liked way better, but I understand that the Jenna's version kind of was more emotional because he made it for his wife, but I wish the single version was on the album. I think it would fit it more. But that's going to be it for my top albums of 2024. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Definitely check all of these albums out, whether I said a song was good or bad. Definitely check it out. Who knows, maybe you'll like a song that I said that was my least favorite. Thank you guys so much for watching. I always look forward to doing this every single year. Let me know in the comments what your favorite album from my list was, or just your favorite album of this year was, and I may check it out. Thank you again, SeatGeek, for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.